Morena, thank you so much for that. Yeah, so first of all, my name is Mel Haarer, and I'm delighted to be part of this leadership presentation in the Wakatipu. So thank you for the invitation, Oded, and thank you, students, for arriving this morning. It's a bit frosty in Arthur's Point today. I don't know what it's like down there, so it's winter is finally hitting us by the looks of it. Right, so yeah, I did prepare a presentation which didn't quite make it over to you guys, but it's really more of a guideline for me. So what I'll do is I'll go through my contents page and just roughly what I thought might be useful for you guys today, and then we can have a question and answer for anyone that might have some want to throw some things at me afterwards. So yeah, so first of all, I'll go through my story and my background and what I do and how I've arrived to do it. I can make it very clear that I never intended to be a leader. I don't actually consider myself a leader, but other people do. So I guess I am. So I have to take that on board. And my leadership role that I've created for myself has come through purpose and trauma and actually looking to support other people. I'll talk about my networking ability, which really has led me to be a leader in the community. And so I am actually a well-being leader. That's my space. And so it would be useful for me to weave in the 5 ways to well-being. I know you guys are familiar with that framework. That's something that I use for my business and that we were talking about last night for the presentation for the parents and some students. I will also weave into the presentation about being mindful and how that can serve us as leaders, whatever avenue you decide to take. Stopping, pausing, resting, and noticing can be one of the most powerful things that we can do in terms of leadership. And what else have I got on this? I'm just trying to juggle this without losing you. I'm going to talk about my personality type and how that aligns with what I do. I'm going to mention about intuition and gut because that has been very helpful for me, and really values and what my key values are, and encouraging you to consider your key values. And also to make it clear that it can be quite isolating being a leader. People are always turning to us for answers, and we don't necessarily have them. So the power of saying, I don't know, and asking questions is very useful. Looking at boundaries, and also just reinforcing the message that stepping out of our comfort zone can often bring the most rewarding results. So yeah, that's going to be that in a nutshell. Okay, so a little bit about me first of all. So I'll be 49 this year. Crikey, I can't believe I'm going to be 50 next year. I am from Devon in the southwest of England. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but I'm a country girl. So I was raised and born pretty much on Dartmoor National Park, which is beautiful, beautiful. So I'm a country girl, beautiful area. I first came to New Zealand as a backpacker when I was 23, and I literally had tears in my eyes when I left on the plane. So I always knew I wanted to come back. So I've been living here now for 15 and a half years. I'm very proud to call myself a citizen of New Zealand. I went to a boarding school, a Catholic convent school, from the age of 5. So I'd go home at weekends. I think that certainly taught me a degree of independence, to say the least. I then went on to study the one thing that I knew I was passionate about, which was travel and tourism. So I guess all my family have been big into traveling. And that's something that's been my key interest, really, which brought me to New Zealand, obviously, in my early 20s, and then to come back. So, I went on to do a couple of business. I did a business high national diploma after school, and then I went on to do a leisure and tourism management degree in London. So that's really been my background. So I should also say that I just arrived back from the UK on Sunday, so I am still a bit jet lagged and I'm not 100%. So you have to excuse me if I sound a bit dithery. Um, So, as well as my education across the tourism sector, I have a qualification in the care industry, caring for young people and children. So, I've worked in that sector as well. Um, I've also worked in retail and various sectors. So, it wasn't really until my late 40s. You have to excuse me, my son's just calling me. Just one moment, please. We're separated parents, so my son lives with his dad this week. So I'm just going to take the time, because family is most important, to let him know what I'm doing and to tell him I love him. Bear with. Where's he gone? No, he's gone. Right, I'm actually going to do this online just to reinforce the importance of family and what should come first above anything else. Hey Ollie, how are you doing, darling? Right, Tinker, I'm just on a Zoom with the Wakatipu High School leadership team and the students there, and I'm doing a presentation. But I just wanted to let them know that I was going to answer to you and tell you that I love you. And perhaps we can talk a bit later today. Would that work for you? Have you got a message for the students at the school this morning? No, no message. All right, I love you, darling. I'll speak to you this evening, okay? Okay, bye. Family comes first. Right, so yeah, so in terms of when I basically left school and university, I worked in the travel industry, sales and marketing, and probably my most powerful role that I learned was when I was invited to work full time after I did a work placement as part of my university degree. That was for a small business, which was a bicycle touring company. And there were only two of us in the office, three of us in total. And I learned more from that lady who was really smart, who was my boss probably, than apart from one other job and the one that I do now. And just having such a varied role and seeing her as a very strong leader. And I've also worked in the communications industry. And then when I came to New Zealand, I worked in tourism, and I basically did that for a few years, and retail. And then after I separated from my ex-husband and life was all rather challenging, I was very fortunate to secure a job with St. John in Queenstown, not too far from you guys. So that role included sales of first aid kits and supplies, essentially, but also fundraising. So as part of that role, that really gave me an opportunity to really build on my networking skills. I've always been very much a people person, and that really gave me the confidence to step out of my comfort zone and throw around new ideas and things that were quite innovative, I guess, and kind of a bit new and exciting. So I was very late in terms of the leadership stuff. In fact, not really until I was 40 did I start really applying my true skills. So moving on to passion and purpose, as I mentioned, it was really adversity that drove me to be a leader in the wellbeing space. So I'll give you a bit of a background around that and how that's happened, without going into too much detail around the trauma. But basically, becoming a new mum was a very challenging time for me, not having any family here for support. So it's very isolating. I felt quite vulnerable. I got a bit of postnatal depression, anxiety, and then a few other things happened with family back in the UK and personal stuff, which essentially led me to grieve for approximately 7 years. And I wasn't aware of that until I went to have some counselling. So I'm very pro counselling and self-development. And as a result of that, I then went and took it upon myself to do 18 months of voluntary research in the community, looking at ways to reduce isolation and vulnerability for other people. Maybe that was part of my helping me to overcome the sadness and a negative headspace, really. And it was really as a result of that I was then invited by the director of people and performance at Real Journeys to raise mental health awareness amongst their teams up in Queenstown and both also down in Tiano. So that was quite a huge challenge for me. I had always wanted to raise mental health awareness when I was working at St. John. I kind of envisaged that as a one-off event, but that wasn't quite the case. So having spoken to and spent this 18 months researching and looking what was missing, knowing that there was a lack of mental health services and support in the community here, of course, that's even more challenging now. I had conversations with the likes of QLDC, so talking to both public and private sectors, so HR leaders, also people like Happiness House, St. John, other charities in the community. So anybody really that was willing to listen and for me to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So I was really stepping out of my comfort zone there. I didn't actually have an intention to become a leader. I just took on this responsibility voluntarily to see how I could make a difference. So that's how it all started, really. So when Real Journeys invited me to raise mental health awareness under contract, and because they could see quite clearly that my skills and ability and experience would blend really nicely from my tourism background, but also working with young people and understanding protection around people and doing things safely. I basically embraced the opportunity. I was terrified. And I went away and thought, well, how on earth can I do this? So I came up with a series of workshops based around the 5 ways to wellbeing. I didn't want to reinvent any wheels. I wanted to look at something that was being used globally as a framework that could be helpful. So that was the best one that I found. So that's the 5 ways, for those of you that don't know, is a model that was developed in Europe, and then it was adopted by the Mental Health Foundation for New Zealand, and they added their taglines. I'm sure you're aware of those. I meant to have a little poster. So I had this opportunity here, and I basically devised 6 workshops, and I trialed those, just 1.5 hours each. And I delivered those. I was terrified and shaking. I was so out of my comfort zone. I'd never delivered a workshop in my life. I'd only attended a few as well. So tried these workshops over a period of 6 months for the teams up here and down in Tiano. So very, very different dynamic going on there in terms of people. We're quite hedonistic up in Queenstown, and we're really dynamic and bubbly and have this energy. Tiano, I'm not saying they're not all those things, but it's a very different feeling. Not quite so perhaps upbeat. So that seemed to be really well embraced. I made sure I organised quantitative and qualitative analysis for every single workshop that I delivered. And then, lo and behold, it seemed to become a need, a social need within workplaces in Queenstown. So I then went on to build up a client base to include Downer and Cadrona, Camp Glenorchy, Queenstown Primary School teacher teams, GJ Gardner, so quite a few different industries. And again, really out of my comfort zone, but I just went ahead and just threw myself into it, really. So that was delivered my first workshop in 2018, and things were going tickety boo until COVID hit, and then of course businesses no longer have capacity to employ external services. So then I chose to start doing online and one-on-one support, so using the same program, but being able to do that and over a 5-week period. So just looking at different programs and how I could really pivot my way around that. So challenging times even for wellbeing providers. But I also need to make it really clear that I am a mental health and wellbeing advocate. I'm not a mental health trained professional. and people seem to really resonate with my story. And that's something that's really useful in a leadership role, I think, especially if you're passionate about something and considering your purpose, to really build on that and highlight that, because people love a good story. And I guess a couple of years into, or maybe 1 year into my research, looking at ways to reduce isolation and vulnerability, somebody had shared some information with me about the Myers-Briggs personality testing. Now, I'm not sure if that's something that's used nowadays. I have heard some conflicting information about it, but what that did do was help me understand. It really worked for me when I went through that. I think it's 12 or 15 personalities that helped me to recognize that my personality type is that of a campaigner. So my strengths as a leader are actually to bring people together and then get them to look at ways to best look after themselves and each other. So that's a really simple tool that was useful for me, but it helped me to identify and feel more confident in my skills, and that actually this is something that I could, should, and would be doing to continue in the future. So moving on to the 5 ways, because I've just been thinking about this. Actually, in terms of leadership, I think this weaves in really nicely. You know, I can't highlight enough that all those 5 ways are really important to be able to lead our strongest and best, healthiest, happiest lives. So part of my role, really, Connect and Care, is to empower people to lead their healthiest and happiest lives. And, you know, if we are able to, as leaders, follow these 5 ways, then I think we're going to be able to be the strongest leaders we can be, or certainly working towards that. So as you know, and as I've shared, I give, and I'm constantly giving my time, words, and presence to people to try and support them. I think it's also really important to notice that I've had to rein that in to an extent also, and have quite strong boundaries around that, because of my background, and that that really my career that I've forged for myself has come from a place of my heart. There is an expectation almost every day for people to give my time, words, and presence, and to help. Now, of course, I have to think about my own well-being as well. So there are some circumstances where I will not accept that invitation, and try and always pass on to people, always thank them for the invitation, but make sure I signpost them to somebody else who I think might be able to help and support them, or to whatever resources are available. So sometimes we need to learn to say no in a leadership role, and not feel guilty about it or be blamed and shamed for whatever reason. So to take notice of the simple things that give you joy. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and how mindfulness can serve us in leadership roles. To be active. Now, I'm sure you guys are aware that it's a minimum recommendation to be active for 150 minutes per week in a 7-day period. That's absolute minimum, and increments of no less than 10 minutes each time, to raise our heart rate and just get that blood flowing. You know, as leaders, the more active we are, as long as it's a healthy amount, I think the better we can perform, because we're not at our best if we're not looking after ourselves. And to connect, obviously, to be there and connect with others. Now, also, disconnection is something that I have found that previously, I would say, I found that if and when I start disconnecting to certain people or ideas, that can either be beneficial or helpful or hindering. So sometimes it's good to actually go, hang on a minute, is this serving me in my life and for my family, or is it hindering? So just encouraging people to think about that, because sometimes as leaders, we can really charge into ideas and things, and then perhaps find ourselves actually more vulnerable, more isolated, and and just to stop and think, well, hang on, is this the right route? And sometimes we learn from failure, and we have to try, but we also need to know when to stop and move on. And then obviously to keep learning. I mean, you guys are going to know, if you're in the leadership team at the high school, that learning it's an everyday thing that you're doing, but sometimes learning something new is going to lead us to something that we had not necessarily considered before. So also I thought it'd be nice to weave in that for me as a leader, one of my values is to strive for positive environments. So whether or not that's at in my home or in my workplace or wherever I might be, if I'm in an organization helping out or whatever. So the three things that we really want to be working towards, which is safety, supportive and strong. So providing a nurturing environment, being open and honest and encouraging other people to do that, and being transparent. I think one thing that's led to my success is being transparent. Now, I think it's also really useful and helpful to share with you guys that even though everything that I do as a leader in the wellbeing space has come from my heart, there have been circumstances over the last few years that people have invited me to share my content for my workshops. So that's kind of work that I've spent time and energy and my life trying to build a business in what I do. And there is an expectation to just, for people, charities included, for me to share everything that I've driven and worked for very, very hard. So that really reinstates or reinforces having to politely thank people for wanting me to share all my information with them. But also, I have said, okay, well, yes, I would love to support you. Let's have a formal meeting. And they don't really want to do that. So, again, having boundaries around what's going to serve me, my family, my business, and also not letting people take advantage of my good nature as a wellbeing provider. So, yeah, being transparent about that and just letting people understand that maybe that's not appropriate sometimes, and also taking accountability for that. So in terms of mindfulness, so there are four elements to mindfulness, which is to stop, pause, rest, and notice. Now, as a leader, one really, really important thing, and I think for me, the best leaders that resonate with me are the ones that listen. Now, it's really there's an expression, I'm not sure where it's come from, but we have two ears and one mouth, use them in proportion. Good leaders are able to sow seeds and ask questions. And sometimes to be a strong leader, it's good to not have a response if we're not sure or it might be conflicting. And just to be able to step back and question whether what we're doing or what other people are doing is going to be beneficial for business or for school or for the workplace or for study or whatever that might be. Well, I hope this presentation is going okay so far. I'm not sure if it's what you want, but this is what you're going to get this morning. Right, so part of my research back in sort of 2017, 18, it was really to try and build on my self-development and skills. So I'd had a degree of counselling, CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, having experienced quite a lot of my own childhood trauma. I had things that I really needed to understand and perhaps undo or rationalise in order to live my best life. and to be the best mum I can be. So to build on that, I actually booked myself onto a meditation course, which is called Vipassana. So that was up in the north of Auckland. That is a 10-day silent meditation course. So no pen, no paper, no talking, no eye contact. Really intense, actually. Probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life, actually, the first time around. The reason I wanted to do that was because I was really understanding the power behind meditation and mindfulness, the way that resonated with me at the time. And that really gave me a skill to be able to listen to my intuition and my gut. So for those of you that may not know, when we talk about, so I've got sun gleaming in my, I'm just going to pull my blind down. Hold on, caller. Aha, I can see. Yeah, so when we talk about the gut and our gut reaction, there's lots of science behind that. If anyone wants to Google it, everything comes from the gut, actually. And being able to slow our stress responses down, and therefore, as a leader, how we respond, how we think, how we feel, being able to notice our thoughts coming and going, and all of that mindfulness stuff, that was a really, really powerful thing for me to do in terms of looking at whether or not, making decisions in my business and whether or not that's going to be a good client for me. I've actually said no to some clients who've wanted to engage in a certain amount of my programming, and I've just made the decision to say no, which is actually a really hard thing to do in business, but just using my gut reaction and my intuition to know what's going to be best for the client, but also best for my business. And sometimes that's about disconnecting from certain things and people. So yeah, mindfulness, do it. It's great. So in terms of core values, I think I've talked about those really, but that's just really highlighting, just having a think about who I am as a person, what my strengths are, how I can build on those, and what's the best thing that I can do in my life to lead myself and lead my family and lead other people. I never ever intended to be a leader, and it wasn't until Diana Hubbard, who, I don't know if you guys know Dick and Diana Hubbard, so they are amazing philanthropists in the Wakatipu community. They ran and owned Hubbard cereals, which you'll see on the shelf in all supermarkets. Diana Hubbard, a few years ago, said to me at a ladies' lunch, she had highlighted that I was a leader in the wellbeing space, and I was like, well, no, I'm not. So sometimes it's, I think it takes confidence to believe in ourselves and know that we're obviously doing good, and if other people are, I guess that came from a place of low self-esteem for me, and now I own it and I am a leader, and it's ace. Woo! I suppose that just reinforces that my leadership style is very humble. Sometimes that's actually been to my detriment in terms of sales and securing clients, having that kind of that killer instinct and getting those sales, but it doesn't really bode very well in the industry that I work in. So, and I like to be open and honest about that, because that's just who I am. So, lonely or living. Now, like I said, it can be a lonely old road doing your own thing in business. And it can feel quite disconnected when you don't have colleagues or other, people to share ideas and wonder whether or not what we're doing is the right thing. It doesn't matter what age you are, it's always good to be able to have mentors. So Dick Hubbard was a mentor of mine for a business idea that I was looking at initially, that I did loads of research around, but decided it wasn't going to be a good idea because it was already existing. and it wasn't competitive enough. Now, of course, the well-being space is hugely competitive. People are really jumping on to that since COVID. So I feel quite fortunate that I kind of established my brand before COVID, and hopefully as things start to improve, and they are, by the way, COVID is, even though it feels very rife here at the moment, having just come back from the UK, it's really amazing to see how life is just so much more normal over there, and it's exciting. So you guys are actually, I think, you are in a really strong position at the moment, even though you might have some anxiety around moving forward into your studies or the workplace because of COVID and everything that's come with that. I actually think, as a provider, this is a really exciting time to be moving forward, because it's a new world, and for you guys to experience what you've been through, what we've been through, that's going to give you huge strength moving forward in a new world, and how people are going to be doing things. So I can only see that as a positive. So yeah, Rod Drury, I'm very fortunate to have him as one of my mentors as well. I wanted to share that with you because never be afraid to ask anybody a question. It doesn't matter how successful they are. I just tried my luck. I sent Rod Drury a message on LinkedIn, and I didn't think for 1 second I would hear back from him. He just lives down the road, obviously, part-time. And the thing is, people that are successful, they love to help other people, and they want to see people succeed. So don't ever, or feel that fear, step out of your comfort zone and just ask. You know, the worst that somebody's going to say is no, they can't help you on this occasion. And if that's the case, great, you've got nothing to lose. So I guess that kind of reinforces the fight, flight, and fear response, which is all to do with our central nervous system. And of course, we're able to slow that down through our breath. So I would strongly encourage you to embrace what other people have learned through their experiences, and to breathe and to smile. Smiling in leadership is, I can't believe how far a smile can go. People love it, and it creates an energy that's contagious. So definitely, if you're ever looking to build on your leadership skills, practice smiling with other people and having fun, having a laugh, because it's powerful. Bet you didn't expect that, did you, in this presentation? Now, on another note, I think I've already shared this, is to know when to back down, and know when you might be knocking on a dead door. And also, it's all very well stepping out of your comfort zone and feeling the fear, but be mindful of your ego, our ego. Now, this again is something, everybody has an ego, and we use it every day, consciously or subconsciously. That's debatable for many people. If you want to be a thoughtful leader, it's really important to watch and notice your ego. And is it all about you, or is it about other people? What kind of leader do you want to be? Identify your values. For me, my leadership style is I don't see myself I'm non-hierarchical. So I see myself walking side by side with other people. I don't see myself in front or behind. It's very much, non-hierarchical and inclusive. And also with the mindfulness stuff and meditation, or however mindfulness works for you, because it's not the same for everybody. Some people actively are mindful, or some people like to sit down and close their eyes for 10 minutes a couple of times a day. Some people do it for hours. That can really help you to notice your own ego, and that's really powerful. If you guys can learn and understand that, the earlier you can learn and understand that, the more successful you will be in your leadership roles. Now, I think coming up to the end of my presentation now, so hopefully that's good timing. So Rod Drury, actually, I asked him to sponsor me for some workshops that I delivered for businesses in the communities suffering the impacts of COVID. So I managed to secure 2 rounds of sponsorship from Rod for that. First of all, in 2020. that was for the Arrowtown community. And then 2021 spring last year, which was held at iFly. And they included the participants being able to fly as part of that, and really help people learn how to manage their stress and understand if they're experiencing signs of anxiety, depression, and all that kind of stuff. So as a result of that, I did prepare a white paper in line with Rod's advice. And if anybody would like to access that, it's succinct, and it's really a formal document for people to understand more about my business and the impact that my workshop programming has on people and their businesses. And you can access that from my website, which is connectandcare.co.nz. And my email is on there as well. So if anybody is interested in having a wee chat, or would like to learn more about my programming, whether it's for yourselves or for your family or anyone else, then please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. So that's it from me, really. I hope it's been a helpful presentation. Probably a bit different to what you're used to, but yeah, I guess, Oded, shall I hand over to you now?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Mel. I know that some students, and thank you very much for kind of your presentation and your words. I know that some of the students will have some questions before we give some time for that.
Sure.
Awesome. So let's throw it to the floor for a couple of questions. Who'd like to kick us off?
Which one of the 5 ways of well-being would you say is most important, or are they all like equally as important for leadership?
That's a good question. Well, for me at the moment, as a wellbeing provider and my programming, at the moment, I believe it's 2 of the 5 ways, which is to be active and take notice. So, you know, with all the stress that we are enduring, whether we're a student or a parent or a teacher or whoever we might be, you know, moving our mood and keeping ourselves fit and healthy physically. Obviously, when you look at the Māori health model, I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. You know, that holistic model, if we're not active, that has huge consequences on our overall well-being. So that, for me, that's the absolute number one, the biggest tip I can give anybody is to do what you can, enjoy what you do, move your mood. And then the second one, in conjunction with that being active, is to really nurture your mind, your body, and your soul. So that's really about mindfulness, however that looks for you as an individual. And that is about the 2 things that we can control, that we can guarantee that we can control in life, which is 1, our breath, and 2, our responses to stress. And, you know, science shows, and there's so much science around it now, that we can slow down our response to stress through our breath and our central nervous system. So I don't know if you guys know, but we have a nerve which runs from here down to our abdomen called the vagus nerve. And there's 2 parts of our brain when we're talking about mindfulness, which is the front part, which is the more modern part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, and then the amygdala, which is the back area here at the back of our heads. So when we were cavemen and women and we were running away from lions and tigers and bears, you know, we were activating this stress response through the amygdala. But now we're able to slow things down and really try and engage our more rational brain, which is the more modern part at the front. So in terms of, you know, if you guys are going into, if you're, I know one of the chaps that was going to be part of the leadership workshop or presentation today, he's got an exam today. I don't know what his name was, but he just excused himself yesterday. So, you know, you guys might have exams, or you might have stresses with boyfriends or girlfriends, or, you know, you might have stuff going on in your families, and the dynamic is really challenging at home at the moment. Lots of parents are stressed, and you know, that's going to have an impact on students. and students worry about their parents, and it's all this big cycle of, oh, it's all very stressful and difficult. But so taking notice of your stress responses is and being able to slow your breath down using some really simple tips. I think at the moment those two are the most imperative at the moment. However, that's not to say that once COVID kind of is a bit more normal, I think all of them are as important as each other, but maybe in different proportions. So being active is the biggest proportion, I think. Taking notice next, and then the other things, you know, you're not necessarily going to give your time, words, and presence as often as you're going to breathe. So yeah, I guess it goes back to that proportionate thing about having 2 ears and 1 mouth, using in proportion. Whatever resonates with you in your life, really, and looking at what you can create time and space for. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
What challenges did you face taking you essentially turned your passion or what you did for 18 months volunteering into a business? What was the biggest challenge you faced doing that?
Yeah, so one of my biggest challenges, really, as a parent as well, is can I make this a sustainable business model? And also another challenge was, is this something, and this is what the guy who was the director of people and performance, who gave me the opportunity to deliver the workshops in the first place and design something for Real Journeys, you know, he had said to me, and lots of other people, the Hubbards and people in the social space in Queenstown, you know, try and see how you think, because moving into basically the mental health space is a space that can be very challenging in itself. You know, and if you don't have firm boundaries around that, it could really have a negative impact on me, both professionally and personally. So I was very careful in my approach to that. And so I met with Wakatipu Mental Health before I basically did my groundwork to ensure that I was doing it using best practice. And the only reason that I knew about that was because I'd worked with young people in residential care with challenging behaviour. So I learned about child protection and protection. And of course, if you've got an understanding about child protection, then that spills over into people of any age, really. So just really following best practice, and also thinking, well, how can I keep myself safe and protect myself? So part of what I do is that I engage and I pay for privately supervision with a mental health care professional, so that I know that I'm doing things the best way that I can. And just really having those conversations with the professionals and asking them what I should not be doing, so that I don't find myself in a sticky situation. So far it's worked. And well, not obviously, but part of what I do is suicide prevention awareness. And, you know, you have to be very careful when you're working in that space. So I can share with you that I know of at least one person that's engaged in my workshops over the last few years that has prevented themselves from suiciding, because they have reached out to resources. Had they not, and they've thanked me for that, had they not engaged in my training, they have shared that it could be a very different story. So, you know, that's pretty big when you're actually saving people's lives. So that's been a huge thing for me. That's something that I have to be very, very careful of as an advocate and not a mental health care professional. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yes, out the back.
Hi there. Sorry, yeah, I was just, earlier in your presentation, you were talking about how you value transparency and openness and stuff in a leader. And then you also talked about Diana Hubbard and how people can kind of see you as a leader without you even really realizing.
Yes.
And I think that's something we can relate to because a lot of us here are seniors and year 13s in this school, and a lot of the student body kind of looks up to us. So I guess my question is, how do you portray like the characteristics of a leader in public spaces without being untransparent or superhuman?
Without being superhuman or untransparent?
Yeah, like just being constantly showing leadership. Like, how can you be more passively inspiring or a leader?
Yeah, okay. Well, so I hope that I'm understanding you. Is what you're asking me, so I guess there's an expectation when you are kind of recognized as a leader to always have the answers if people are turning to you. Is that what you mean? How do you manage that?
That's kind of what I was going for, yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah, so I think sometimes, sometimes it's really important to understand our levels of patience and what we have capacity and space for. If we're invited into a leadership role at school, for example, and you take that on board, important to have boundaries around that, and for people to understand what those boundaries are, and to really, if you want to be open and transparent, to just share with people that you don't have the answers all the time. However, if you don't have an answer or a response that's going to be appropriate at that time, that you'll try and find someone that will. So, we're none of us are super, what are we? What did you say before? I quite like that. Supermen and super women. We've all got heads, we've all got hearts, we've all got our own stuff going on in our lives. And it's actually, there can't be an expectation for us to have answers all the time. Maybe when you're working, in a business that's got, well, I mean, there is an expectation in business realistically, but again, a good leader has to know when to say, you know what, I don't know, but let me help you find someone that might know. So just having that confidence to take ownership of that and be accountable for your own barriers or your own, what's the word I'm looking for? Something. Just be mindful about when you don't have all the answers. And like I was saying, circling back to the mindfulness stuff and your intuition and your gut and your ego, don't pretend to know the answers. That's when we find ourselves in a sticky situation. If you pretend to know stuff, that's never going to bode well, and that's only going to go against us as leaders. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think we have time for one more question. A couple more.
Okay. What advice would you give your 17-year-old self?
Oh, that is such a good question. My 17-year-old self. Well, how honest do I be about this? Sometimes I have to question my openness and honesty and transparency. But actually, I'm going to be open and honest, and I do share it in my workshops. When I was 16 or 17, I started trying drugs. And I continued to try drugs. And I don't think that served me. I've always been a person of quite a curious nature. And I did really like to party when I was younger. Now I'm really boring. God, I need to go out more. But I would say to anybody, like in terms of leadership and talking to my son, he's 10. He did ask me a few years ago if I had tried drugs, and I was open and honest with him. And I don't believe in telling people not to. Don't do that. Don't smoke. Don't do this. Don't do that. I don't believe that that's helpful or useful, particularly having worked with young people in residential care and being a youth worker. But what I would say is, if you are curious and you find yourself in a group where people are starting to experiment with drugs and substances that are essentially illegal, to be very careful about that and to try and have a relationship with your peers that you trust, your parents, youth workers, teachers, to share with them or ask them advice and say, look, there's an opportunity for me. People are encouraging me to try this. I don't really know how I feel about it. And to seek advice before you do engage in these things, because they can be really detrimental to our health and happiness and can lead to all sorts of problems, impacting your studies, impacting your work, impacting your choices. So a message that I share with my son is to who I was talking to earlier, is if you do find yourself in that situation, have a conversation with an adult first and speak to them first. So that would be, if I was to look at my 17-year-old self, I certainly didn't have an open and honest relationship with my mum where I could have or with the nuns at the school I went to, or, you know, I just found myself hanging around with people that were basically, I think most of them had been through childhood trauma, and they were really trying to, we're really trying to mask reality and find happiness in other ways. And that really hit home to me when I did my Vipassana 10-day meditation course, was drugs don't serve me or us ordinarily. So just be careful about that, and make informed choices before you do, if you are tempted or interested or curious around substances, because it can lead to abuse and not leading your best life. So I hope that answers your question. That's very open and honest, and I think that's a really strong message, and it's a good message to finish this on, actually. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I just want to say on behalf of all the students here, we've seen some quite traditional takes on leadership.
What? Oh, yeah! Let's finish with a party! Woohoo! Love it!
Just waiting around for the bell now. But yeah, we've seen quite a few traditional takes on leadership in this speaker series, but we haven't really seen someone that's had such a focus on being a leader in the well-being space. And with our leadership team, we've made it one of our core whys this year to value well-being at the school. So for me, in that perspective, your presentation really stood out for me, and I want to thank you for coming in on behalf of all the students here and on behalf of Wakatipu High School.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for arriving today. I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you.
Have a good day, guys.